What if everything you've ever heard about money was a lie? What if the very phrases you've been told your whole life, like money is hard to come by, only the rich get richer, or art doesn't pay the bills, were actually the things keeping you from true prosperity? In today's video, I'm going to share the story of Vincent, a visual artist who believed all of that. Until one day, a 70-year-old woman with a calm smile and a book in her hands turned his world upside down. If you feel like you're constantly chasing money but it always slips away, this story will shake your perspective and reveal a truth you've probably never heard before. Watch until the end because I'm going to show you how one simple shift in mindset, inspired by the teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn, made money start chasing him. Yes, money came looking for him. All of Florence Scovel Shinn's quotes will be linked in this video and listed in the description and pinned comment for you to reflect on later. Chapter 1. An artist's hands, a laborer's wallet. Vincent had the hands of a sculptor. Hands that could shape iron, aluminum, copper, even industrial scrap, into forms that looked alive. Bold, almost futuristic sculptures that came to life in the small garage of the house he shared with his wife, Susan, and their 5-year-old daughter, Margaret, in Newark, New Jersey. But despite all that creative sensitivity, Vincent's bank account felt like it was carved from stone, and it was always in the red. "Daddy, can I take my sculpture to school tomorrow?" Margaret asked one evening, holding up a small piece he had made for her out of wire and recycled glass. Vincent smiled, trying to hide the ache in his chest. "Of course, my princess. Just be careful, it's fragile." That same night, he spent hours preparing quotes for yet another exterior paint job. His real source of income. That's how he paid the rent, bought groceries, and covered his mother-in-law's medication. Art was just a dream, squeezed into the gaps between survival. And maybe you can relate to him. Maybe you also have a gift, a passion, a calling the world keeps ignoring. Maybe, like Vincent, you've come to believe that making a living doing what you love is a privilege for a lucky few. And that money doesn't mix with purpose. That sounds like you. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover could turn your world upside down. And maybe, for the first time, set it right. Vincent grew up hearing his father say, with bitterness in his voice, "Money is like good wine, son. It only shows up on someone else's table." And that belief sank deep into Vincent's heart. Even on Sundays, when he sat in church and prayed with true faith, there was always one silent plea: "God, show me a sign. Way. Anything." But up until then, the signs seemed to be hiding. And that's exactly when his story began to change. Not with a stroke of luck, but with an ordinary job. A simple request: to paint the exterior of a country house in the nearby town of Montclair. The owner was an elderly woman, graceful and soft-spoken, Mrs. Stewart. Vincent had no idea, but that job would be the start of something much bigger. "Actually, let me ask you something. Do you believe there's a moment when life can completely turn around? Have you ever felt like you were just about to stumble into something or someone that could change everything?" That's what started to happen to Vincent. He just didn't know it yet. All he carried with him at that moment was exhaustion, and a gift buried beneath buckets of paint. But as Florence Scovel Shinn once said, "Nothing is ever truly lost. That which is yours, through right action, will return to you." And Vincent's gift was about to come rushing back like an avalanche. Chapter 2. The House on Top of the Hill. The sun hadn't even fully risen yet when Vincent pulled up his old van in front of the house he'd be painting over the next few days. Mrs. Stewart's home was everything he'd never dared to imagine for himself. White, grand, with arched windows and blooming columns. A manor perched atop a hill, surrounded by ancient trees and the kind of respectful silence that only those who understand the value of time can appreciate. "Good morning, Mr. Vincent. Punctuality is a form of elegance. I like that." Mrs. Stewart's voice was calm, like a lake at dusk. She dressed with understated elegance and had one of those gazes that seemed to see beneath the surface. At first, they spoke only about the job: paints, scaffolding, timelines. But by the second day, as Vincent painted the side of the house, She approached with 2 glasses of iced tea. "My daughter Constance thought your bird sculpture was amazing. It's in the front hall now." Vincent, surprised, wiped his dirty hands on a rag. "Oh, you saw that? I just left it leaning there by accident." She smiled. "Nothing is ever really accidental, my dear. I believe the universe has very creative ways of delivering signs." That word made Vincent's heart beat faster. He had been asking for one. Could this be it? In the days that followed, the painting routine turned into something else, a rhythm of conversation. Mrs. Stewart showed up around 11 a.m. each day, sometimes with tea, sometimes with words. And what words they were! She didn't talk about money the way most people did. There was no mention of grinding hustle or blind luck. She spoke of awareness, inner alignment, spiritual laws. And then, on the 4th day, she said something that made Vincent drop his paintbrush. "Vincent, money was never on the outside. It's a reflection, a mirror of what you believe is possible for yourself." The words hit him like a silent explosion. And maybe you felt what he felt, that no matter how hard you work, money keeps slipping through your fingers. That the work shows up, but the reward never does. Maybe, like Vincent, you've been pouring your energy into painting other people's houses, while your own spiritual house is left unattended. Then she did something even more unexpected. She brought him a book. Old, weathered, the cover worn, but with a glow that felt almost symbolic. The Game of Life and How to Play It, by Florence Scovel Shinn. "Read it, Vincent. Replace the lies you've been told with these truths. I was where you are, 35 years old, lost. This book turned everything around for me. It can do the same for you." Vincent held the book as if it might break. He didn't understand all of it at first, but he felt something, as if his tired soul recognized the words before even reading them. "And what about you? Small Blue Diamond, have you ever felt like your life is just waiting for a new manual? Small Blue Diamond, ever caught yourself thinking that maybe what you're missing isn't more work, but a new way of thinking?" That evening, sitting on the edge of the scaffolding, Vincent read the first line. "Man can change his conditions by changing his words." Superscript 2. And in that moment, without even realizing it, he began to change his destiny. Chapter 3. What you think multiplies. That night, Vincent carried the book home like someone holding a secret. Susan, his wife, noticed something different in his eyes as he tucked Margaret into bed. "Vin, did something happen today?" "Maybe. I met a 70-year-old woman and a book that feels like it's speaking directly to me." Susan laughed softly, but with the kind of tenderness that comes from quiet hope. Vincent wasn't one to get excited about much. If something had touched him, it was worth paying attention to. Later, stretched out on the living room couch with the lights low and a mug of coffee in hand, he flipped through the pages of Mrs. Stewart's book. He swapped his phone screen for Florence's words. And then he read, "The subconscious has no sense of humor and no argument. It simply accepts what you affirm." Superscript 3. Vincent closed the book slowly. It felt like that sentence had been written just for him. For years, he had repeated things like, "Art doesn't make money. I'm an artist, but I have to hustle on the side to pay the bills. Maybe one day, when Margaret's older." And the universe, obedient as ever, had responded, "As you wish. Here is your reality." Can you see yourself in that too? Small Blue Diamond, have you ever noticed how often we repeat things that quietly sabotage our lives, without even realizing it? Small Blue Diamond, have you caught yourself constantly expecting the worst, and then watching it unfold exactly that way? As Florence put it, words and thoughts are boomerangs. When you throw them out into the world, they come back. The next day, during a break from painting, Vincent mentioned to Mrs. Stewart that he'd started reading the book. She smiled with a kind of peace that could calm a storm. "It's not about reading, Vincent. It's about absorbing. Every sentence is an invitation to let go of scarcity." Then she asked him, "What did you grow up hearing about money?" Vincent sighed. "That it was for other people. That poor folks had to accept their fate. She nodded. And you accepted it. He went quiet. But now, you can refuse it. You can change what you believe, and in doing so, change what you experience. It was on that crisp autumn morning in New Jersey that a seed was planted. Not a business strategy, not a sales pitch, seed of truth. And the truth, when it lands, either blooms or burns. Vincent didn't know it yet, but he was at the beginning of a spiritual journey disguised as a professional turning point. But maybe you already sense it. Green circle, the first step toward changing your financial life, doesn't live in your resume. It lives in your mind. Green circle, and the second step is in the words you choose to say and believe. At the end of that day, in silence, Vincent prayed. But this time, he didn't ask for anything. He simply gave thanks. For the first time, he could see a crack in the wall. Chapter 4. Be careful what you hear and what you repeat. On the third day of work at Mrs. Stewart's house, Vincent arrived early. Before even picking up a paint roller, he stepped onto the back porch and stood there for a few minutes, quietly observing her garden. The metal and glass sculptures, swaying gently in the morning breeze, reminded him of his own creations, piled up in his garage, covered with old sheets, waiting for a chance to be seen. "Why doesn't anyone see what I see?" he murmured. Mrs. Stewart approached silently, as if she'd heard that question many times before. "Vincent, sometimes the problem isn't that the world doesn't see. It's that you don't show it. And worse, you don't believe it's even worth showing." He smiled faintly, embarrassed. She went on. "Have you ever stopped to think that maybe you were trained to hide?" Those words hit deep. He thought back to his childhood, to the voice of his father, who'd speak with a bitter edge. "Artist. That's just laziness dressed up fancy. Money is for people who grind hard. That stuff. Rich kid nonsense." And even though Vincent had grown up, those words had never really left him. Police car light, maybe you carry words like that too. Inherited like silent curses. Small blue diamond. Money doesn't grow on trees. Small blue diamond, if someone's rich, it's because they stepped on others to get there. Small blue diamond, people like us weren't born for that. And as Florence said, man is like a broadcasting station. He sends out thoughts which are received by others on the same wavelength. If you're transmitting scarcity, you're tuning into scarcity. That's what Vincent began to understand there, in that garden. Mrs. Stewart, with the wisdom of decades behind her, explained, "You need to clear out the mental trash that isn't even yours. Your father was wrong, Vincent. He was just repeating what he'd heard from other bitter men. But you can break that cycle." He didn't respond, just looked up at the sky. It felt like a crack had opened in the concrete wall around his mind. Florence had written, "Whatever man feels deeply or imagines clearly is impressed upon the subconscious and carried out in the most minute detail." Vincent was starting to feel differently. He was starting to imagine differently. And you? Green circle, what phrases have you been repeating without realizing it? Green circle, what beliefs did your parents plant in your mind? Ones that still control your financial reality, even if they're no longer around. What you repeat often shapes what you experience constantly. That afternoon, when Vincent returned home, he looked at his garage with new eyes. He pulled the sheets off his sculptures, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt like maybe what was hidden there wasn't just scrap metal, but something golden. Chapter 5. Wrong belief creates wrong life. On the fourth day, right after breakfast, Mrs. Stewart invited Vincent to sit with her in the garden for a few minutes. Vincent hesitated. He was eager to finish the job. But she smiled and said, "Vincent, stop chasing money. Sitting and listening is also work, especially when what you're about to hear can change everything." So he sat down. She opened Florence's book once again and read aloud. "Fear is man's greatest enemy. Fear is inverted faith. It is faith in evil instead of good." Vincent stayed quiet. His throat tightened. It was as if she had read straight into his soul. "You know, Vincent," she said gently, "you're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of succeeding." His eyes widened. "You're afraid that if you become wealthy, someone will point fingers, that your friends will judge you, that you'll become exactly what your father despised, a successful man." The words hit like a punch to the gut. 'Cause she was right. How many times had he sabotaged himself? How many times had he nearly shared his work, only to retreat? It wasn't a lack of talent. It was an overload of inner blocks. Have you ever felt that too? The fear of standing out, the shame of wanting more, the worry that prosperity might distance you from others. As Florence once said, abundance is a state of mind, so is poverty. And Vincent's state of mind was that of a prison built out of loyalty to failure. "Vincent," she said firmly, "you need to set yourself free from the obligation to repeat your parents' lives. They did the best they could. Now it's your turn to do it differently." That night he barely slept. Mrs. Stewart's words and Florence's echoed in his mind. "You're not afraid to fail. You're afraid to succeed. Poverty is a state of mind." And so he picked up an old notebook, and with trembling hands he wrote, "I accept prosperity, accept abundance. I release the fear of having more." It was the beginning of a new reprogramming. And what about you? Can you imagine living a prosperous life without guilt? Or do you still believe that having money is a problem instead of a blessing? For the first time, Vincent was choosing to believe in good. Because Florence had already warned, man sees first in his mind what he wishes to manifest. And Vincent was beginning to see. Chapter 6. Signs appear when the mind opens. On the 5th day of work, something began to shift, not in the world around Vincent, but within him. He woke up feeling lighter. For the first time in years, he didn't feel that familiar tightness in his chest when thinking about overdue bills or the sculptures gathering dust in the tiny shed behind his house. Something inside him was different. When he arrived at Mrs. Stewart's house, she was already waiting with a warm smile and an envelope in hand. "Vincent," she said, "I want you to read this tonight. It's one of the notes I wrote when I first started practicing Florence's teachings." He took the envelope with reverence, as if it were something sacred. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, his heart pounding, he opened it. Inside, a neatly written note. "Man can change his conditions by changing his words. Every word carries the power of prophecy. Your mouth is a magic wand." Superscript 1. And just below it a question. "Vincent, what prophecies have you been speaking over your own life?" Struck him like lightning. He started replaying the phrases he had said almost daily. "Art doesn't make money. These sculptures are just a hobby. With a young child, there's no way to grow. I'm poor, but I'm honest." It was as if he had been declaring emotional and financial bankruptcy, over and over again. Florence had been right all along. And what about you? Have you stopped to notice the phrases you speak every day? "There's never enough money. Life is hard. Nothing ever works out for me." So be careful. Because as Florence warns, man is his own devil. He attracts lack and limitation with his own words and thoughts. That night, Vincent made a pact with himself. He picked up the same notebook from the night before and wrote, "My words create my world. Starting today, I choose to speak only words of abundance, beauty, and fulfillment." The next day, when he arrived at Mrs. Stewart's house, she smiled before he even said a word. "Your vibration has changed, Vincent." Felt it. Do you know why? Because words carry energy. And you've finally started speaking like a prosperous man, not a spiritual beggar. He didn't know what to say, but he felt it. Inside him a spark had been lit. And if, as Florence taught, faith is the invisible substance that shapes reality, then maybe, just maybe, Vincent was finally starting to shape something new. Chapter 7. the day everything started to flow. On the 7th day of painting, the sky was heavy, but Vincent felt light. It was as if the weight of his soul had finally lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in a long while, his mind wasn't filled with fear, but with possibility. As he painted the side of Mrs. Stewart's porch, she approached with 2 cups of tea. "Have you been doing your affirmations, Vincent?" she asked, handing him one of the cups. He nodded. "Every day. I write them down. I speak them out loud. And last night, I dreamed one of my sculptures came to life. It was moving like it had a heartbeat." She smiled. "That's life answering you. When you begin to align with truth, the invisible starts to shift." And then she said something Vincent would never forget. "Everything you desire already exists. It's just on a different frequency. And it's your mind that either tunes in or doesn't. And you, here with me now. How many times have you longed for something with all your heart, but at the same time whispered to yourself, 'This isn't for me. I'm not good enough. It'll never work out.' Those aren't just thoughts. They're frequencies. And frequencies don't lie." Florence wrote, "Words open doors. When spoken with faith, they tear through even what was once closed tight." And that's exactly what began to happen for Vincent. That afternoon, after wrapping up the day's work, Mrs. Stewart invited him into one of the rooms in her home, a space she often used to host artistic dinners for her friends. The walls were lined with modern paintings, the lighting was soft, and at the center, there was an open space. She pointed to the center of the room and said, "That space is reserved for one of your sculptures. I want to buy it. But more than that, I want to introduce your art to my friends. You can't keep hiding your gift, Vincent. That's dishonoring what God gave you." He was stunned. "But my sculptures are made from scrap. I've never exhibited them. I don't even know if..." She gently but firmly interrupted. "Enough with, 'I don't know.' You just didn't know how to change. But now you do." And there, in that softly lit room, something inside Vincent was unlocked. It was as if God had finally whispered, "I heard your prayers. But first, you had to learn how to hear your own soul. And what about you who's still reading this now? Isn't it time you stopped hiding too?" Chapter 8. The First Sale, the First Miracle. Vincent's first sculpture sold wasn't his most beautiful, nor his most intricate, but it was the first one made with faith. Because for the first time, as he welded the metal pieces together, he silently repeated Florence's words in his mind. "I am an irresistible magnet for all that is mine by divine right." Deep down there was still a trace of doubt, but it was small, almost unnoticeable, because there, in that makeshift garage studio, the noise in his mind was finally giving way to presence. Do you feel that? That quiet calm that settles in when we stop resisting the good. It was in that state that Vincent completed the piece. He called it Resurgence. 3 days later, Mrs. Stewart sent him a message. "Vincent, we're hosting a special dinner here on Saturday. I want to introduce your work to my guests. Bring Resurgence. Dress well. Get ready to sell." He froze. He had no idea what to charge. He had never sold anything before. But then he remembered what she had told him just days earlier. "You're not selling metal. You're selling energy. What your art awakens in people. That's your price." On Saturday night, as he arrived at Mrs. Stewart's home with his sculpture covered by a white cloth, something felt different. People there, their eyes, the way they greeted him. It was as if he was finally being seen. When it came time for the unveiling, everyone gathered around. And when he pulled the cloth off, silence fell. Long. Until a distinguished middle-aged man stepped forward. "You made this out of scrap?" "Yes, sir. Every piece was collected from the streets, scrapyards, industrial waste." The man smiled. "I want this piece. But more than that, I want to introduce you to my brother. He runs a contemporary art gallery in Manhattan." "May I?" Vincent's hand was trembling. Yes, you may." That night, He not only sold his first piece for $2,000, he also received his first invitation to exhibit his work in New York. And you? Have you had your resurgence moment yet? Or are you still clinging to your old self, afraid to step into the new? Florence once wrote, "Fear is faith turned upside down. Have faith in the good, and good will come." That's exactly what Vincent did. And that night was just the beginning. Chapter 9. The door that no one could close anymore. When Vincent first stepped foot in Manhattan, he was no longer the same man who once carried ladders and paintbrushes through the neighborhoods of New Jersey. He was still humble, still grateful, but now he knew that the inner world shapes the outer one, and that his art was never about scrap metal. It was about soul. The gallery was quiet and minimalist, tucked in the heart of Chelsea. Constance, Mrs. Stewart's daughter, had arranged everything with care and intention. She told him, "Vincent, you're not just here to sell. You're here to be seen. Your name matters." And in his chest, like a whisper from within, he remembered, nothing is too small for God, and every detail is cared for by the divine mind. The first exhibit featured 9 pieces. 7 sold on opening night. And the most surprising part, one was purchased by a European collector for $12,000. The same sculpture Vincent had almost taken apart 2 weeks earlier, because he thought it looked too ugly. Have you ever done that? Given up on something precious, just because it didn't seem good enough? Just know, what looks awkward to human eyes may be a masterpiece in the eyes of spirit. In the days that followed, interviews started popping up. Articles on art blogs, features in local pages. Susan, his wife, cried with joy. "Vincent, Margaret is going to grow up knowing her father never gave up." And little Margaret, just 5 years old, proudly told her classmates, "My daddy's an artist. He makes sculptures that shine." But despite the growing success, Vincent stayed grounded. With each new step, he reread the underlined passages in Florence's book. With each doubt, he'd close his eyes and declare, "Doors open for me by divine right." And you know what happened? A national contemporary art magazine featured him on the cover. The poet of metal, one man's journey from scrap to spirit. Yes, spirit. Because now his art was funding social projects, workshops for underprivileged youth, and even scholarships for new artists in his hometown. Vincent never wanted just money. He wanted legacy, and he was building one day by day, with courage, faith, and inspired action. And you? Have you ever stopped to consider that maybe what you need isn't more strength, but more trust? Florence wrote, "Faith removes obstacles, opens paths, and dissolves walls." Now Vincent was walking through doors he once only dreamed of, and no one could shut the doors that the divine mind had flung wide open for him. Chapter 10. The true inheritance that money can't buy. Time passed. 6 months. Half a year since that first conversation under Mrs. Stewart's porch. Vincent had changed. He was lighter, more present, more whole. His studio was now a renovated old warehouse. Spacious, airy. Instrumental music floated through the space. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air. And pieces of scrap metal were neatly sorted by color and shape. But the most precious thing there was Margaret's presence. Every day after school, she would run straight to him, wrap her little arms around his legs and ask, "Daddy, what are you creating today?" And he'd smile and answer, "Something that will help the world remember what it feels, and what it's forgotten." And you know what? The world hadn't just remembered Vincent. The world began waiting for him. Today, his sculptures are commissioned months in advance. His works have gone to Miami, Berlin, Sao Paulo, Tokyo. But he never left New Jersey, never missed Sunday Mass, never stopped giving a portion of his income to change the lives of other artists. He used to say, "True abundance is when your life starts blessing people you'll never even meet." And that's what Vincent had built. But do you know what he always kept close? That very first copy of Florence's book. Dog-eared, underlined, creased and filled with notes no one else could understand. Florence had written, "Man can change his own destiny through the spoken word." And that's exactly what he had done. With words, with faith, with art. On his last visit to Mrs. Stewart, now in her wheelchair, she held his hand and said, "Vincent, when the spirit awakens, the entire universe moves to confirm the truth. You confirmed mine." He cried. And replied, "I just had to stop believing everything they told me about money. And start listening to what Florence said about me. Now take a moment. Look within. How many lies about money are you still carrying? How many inherited beliefs are still holding you back? How many times have you told yourself, 'This isn't for me,' without even realizing it?" The truth, as Florence taught, sets you free. But first, it confronts you. Vincent faced his fears, his wounds, his limiting beliefs. And on the other side of pain, he found purpose. It wasn't luck. It was awareness. And you? Are you ready to stop believing everything they told you? And start experiencing the truth of divine prosperity for yourself? Florence would answer you clearly and boldly. Nothing is impossible to the mind that knows what it wants and trusts in the power of spirit. You may have gotten this far thinking Vincent's story is a rare one. But the truth is, what he experienced is possible for anyone who has the courage to quiet the noise of the world and listen to the voice of spirit. Vincent didn't become wealthy because he met a wealthy woman. He became prosperous because he finally understood that the key wasn't out there. It was within. Florence Scovel Shinn taught, "Whatever you affirm with faith, the universe will move heaven and earth to bring it into form." And that's exactly what you need to remember. Stop repeating what the world told you about money. Money is not a sin. Money is not a curse. Money is an obedient servant to the command of your mind and your vibration. If you're tired of living on the edge, like Vincent once was, then start where he started, with a choice. The choice to break free from the lies. The choice to believe in prosperity as a divine expression. The choice to live guided by a spiritual truth that liberates and multiplies. You already have what you need. Now it's your turn to write a new story. And maybe one day you'll say too, "My life changed, because one day I chose to stop believing everything they told me about money." If you've made it this far, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Leave a like, and share this video with someone whose life might be enriched by it. That would truly make us happy. All the Florence Scovel Shinn quotes featured in this video will be available in the description and pinned comment below. See you in the next video.